Blitzer's muffin here. I thought of a topic that actually be quite interesting to go over is to go over the best and worst camo ratings of tanks from tier 5 to tier 10. Now this is just not mentioning the best with either medium light, worst, heavy, because we obviously know that tank destroyers typically have the best and whatnot. But this is just to go over really good, noteworthy tanks that have great camo ratings from a medium tank perspective, also from a tank destroyer perspective, and also going over the worst camo ratings for tank destroyers as well, and just overall in general, just to give you a really good aspect. Now, how I'm going off of this is from blitzstarsdata.com. I went over and compared all of the camo data, tried putting together a list that made sense just from these different data points and what looked like the tanks that had the best camo ratings. Now, camo in general, for those that don't understand how it works, is the ability that your tank has when you have a greater camo rating. That means your tank has a greater chance of not being detected by the enemy. So there's some factors when playing the game, such as view range, that helps your tank get visibility on enemy tanks sooner, the greater the view range it has. And your camo rating actually helps against that view range so that you don't get detected. So basically how this works off BlitzStars data is there's 4 different factors to go off of. The first one is camo while you're staying still and what that rating is, camo while you're moving, and then there's camo while you're still after you've taken a shot, and then there's the camo rating after you've taken a shot while moving. So there's 4 different factors here, and they all have different numbers typically. So diving right in, going into tier 5, some very noteworthy ones that were actually among some of the best was actually not even a tank destroyer. It was the AMX ELC BIS with a camo rating of 38 while staying still, 38 while moving, so it has the same camo rating, 10 while moving and or staying still and shooting, and then 10 while moving and shooting. So very impressive there that the camo rating almost doesn't even change from that 38 rate and the 10 rate stage, if that makes sense. So just giving you an idea of how these numbers work. The next one is the T67 with a camo rating even better. So higher the number, the better. The lower the number, the camo rating is worse. With a 41 while still, 25 while moving, 15 while still and not shooting, and 9 while moving and shooting. And then the worst was the Nightmare, actually, a tank destroyer, which this is just the worst among the tank destroyers of tier 5, which is 38 while still not shooting, 4 with the shot, and then 11 while moving and not shooting, and then 1 while moving and shooting. So when you're moving and shooting, you actually have a very, very terrible camo rating. So meaning that when you take a shot, you can see how your camo rating drops significantly. So that's how this works. Now, overall worst in tier 5 is actually the T1 Heavy with a camo rating of 8, 4, 2, and 1. So 8 while still and not moving, 4 while moving and not shooting, 2 while not moving and shooting, and then 1 moving and shooting. So hopefully I won't have to clarify that every time, but just to once again reiterate and give you an idea of how these numbers work. Now at tier 6, the best ones with the camo rating was the AMX 12T with a camo rating of 32, 32, 7, and 7, which is really good. Very impressive on how those both sides stay the same. Next is the Jagdpanzer at a 42, 25, 15, and 9. which is pretty good. So those are the two with the best camo rating at tier 6. Now the worst is actually the SU-100Y with 12, 7, 3, and 2, and as the worst from a tank destroyer standpoint. And the worst overall is actually the brand new ARL, or it's actually, I mean, both of these, they have the same. It's the ARL 44 and the Eraser at 4, 2, 1, and 0. So quite interesting there. Going into tier 7, you have the best camo rating tanks at with the AMX 1375 and the Spa Panzer SPIC or SPIC, known as, with a 31, 31, 7, and 7 camo rating. The E25 with a camo rating of 44, 26, 15, and 9. And the worst camo rating for a tank destroyer is the Vindicator at a 17, 17, 4, and 4. And then overall, the worst at tier 7 is actually the M6A2E1 with a camo rating of 2, 1, 0, and 0. So you can kind of tell that the camo rating also has an effect on the size of the tank as well. Tanks that are much more smaller, like the Spa Panzer, SPIC, or the AMX 1375, those are smaller tanks. Vindicator, M6A2E1, they're bigger tanks, and those have the worst camo ratings typically, but it's almost not even the case. There's some tanks a little bit later on that I thought would have had a worse camo rating, but there's actually others that have the worst one. So going into tier 8, the ones with the best camo rating is actually between, these all had the same, the AMX 1390, the RU251, and the FE301 with a camo rating of 31, 31, 7, and 7. Also the WZ120 GFT with 41, 24, 7, and 4 from a tank destroyer standpoint, along with some other noteworthy ones, the RHM at 40, 24, 8, and 5, and the T28 at 32, 19, 10, and 6. So at 10, the one that is staying still and taking a shot had actually the best camo rating, which was impressive just on that factor. Now, the worst camo rating for a tank destroyer at tier 8 is actually the Jagdpanther 2 with 18, 11, 5, and 3, which kind of surprised me. But yeah, I mean, I guess a very tall tank destroyer-ish for tier 8. And then overall, the worst camo rating, which I personally thought it was going to be the VK168 premium, but it's actually the M6A2E1 EXP with a camo rating of 2, 1, 0, and 0. So just horrible. Going into tier 9, the best camo rating tanks is the Batchat 25 TAP at 28, 28, 3, and 3. The prototypical standard B at 28, 21, 6, and 5. And from a tank destroyer standpoint, the SU-122-54 with a camo rating of 38, 23, 10, and 6. Now, the worst camo rating tanks at tier 9 from a tank destroyer standpoint is actually the FV4004 Conway at 15, 9, 2, and 1. And overall, this makes sense. The Mauschen at 4, 2, 1, and 0. Just very, very big. So that kind of makes sense, but surprised me on the FV404, I guess, even though that one may be big. Now for tier 10, the tanks with the best camo rating is the Vickers Light 105, 31, 31, 7, and 7. Now, with that tank having the best view range and one of the best camo ratings, that is crazy. That is actually an excellent combo to have, especially from a light tank perspective. From a tank destroyer perspective, it's the Object 268 at 29, 17, 7, and 4. Now, the ones with the worst camo rating from a tank destroyer standpoint is the Death Star, the FV215B183 at 5, 3, 0, and 0. And then not too far behind, the worst overall, which makes sense, is the Mouse at 3, 1, 0, and 0. So hopefully this list was actually quite interesting, maybe helps you in your decision and aspects while playing the game on maybe how to utilize these tanks a little bit more in your gameplay. This is the Muffin here. You guys stay cool and keep tanking.